the opportunity of financial resources expended on national security with clear 75% of our national security progress. And I will tell you how.
The organization has. So we're talking about how the board behaves, or in some cases, how they misbehave, because that also happens, rather than the tax they do.
Very rare Yoruba names that I know.
I tell you, I've secured the name and hello there. I welcome you to yet another scintillating but educative ICAN on Air series, powered by the Institute. I mean, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Our new chapter of our old charter gets us to examine today the subject circular economy. Opportunities for professional accountants. This new chapter recognizes that businesses, governments, NGOs, and other citizens around the world increasingly recognize the challenge caused by make dispose approach to production and consumption. For instance, in 2019, over 92 billion tons of materials were extracted and processed, contributing to about half of global CO2 emissions. The resulting wastes, including plastics, textiles, food, electronics, and much more, is taking its toll on the environment and, of course, naturally, on human health. Mr. Jonathan Ikeolumba, ACCA, as our guests on a question and answer segment on this program today, will throw insights on opportunities to turn waste to wealth that is available to us as professionals, as businessmen, as separate corporal sapere, eating our daily bread on this surface of our earth. Mr. Ikeolumba is imbued with vast experience of working across several organizations with different business structures and operating models. He is very passionate about solving complex business problems and helping businesses create value. He, amongst others, is a member of the faculty of the EDC. The EDC is an arm of the Lagos Business School and of really the Pan-Atlantic University in Lagos. More on our guests very shortly. Also, on this segment of the program, we'll let you into some tidbits of ICAN Diary, few adverts, few things you should know about the Institute. Talking about the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Please stay on, stay connected. We shall be back with you very shortly. Yes, Mr. Jonathan Ikeolumba, you are welcome to ICAN on Air.
Good evening, Mr. Akin. It's just a pleasure to be here. I've been a member of the Institute for a while, and any opportunity we have to just be or serve or help or just add value to the Institute is always just a pleasure to do this. I'm sincerely very grateful to be on this platform. Thank you so much.
You are most welcome. And we look at this subject. It's not on the usual balance of what you get at the commanding heights. Circular economy. And the way I like to frame it so that our viewers and participants can get a feel of what all this is about is to set the tone to understand basically a definition of terms. Circular gives the impression of a round, perhaps those who love soccer, the round leather game, or some other round objects. Or are we like Galileo thinking of the world going in circle? So please provide us with a broad understanding of what circular economy is.
All right. Okay, so I mean, you've said it all. I mean, speaking on the secular nature of what we're going to be speaking about, but just to be very clear, so a secular economy is an economic system where essentially what we are trying to do is to optimize the use of the resources in the system and ensure that we minimize waste, to its barest minimum. And really understanding where the word secular comes from is, if you look at traditional economic system, it's a linear system, and I'll explain what I mean. So when you started, you said, if you look at most productions we do, most manufacturing, or the way we deliver value as businesses. So what typically happens is, we source the inputs we would need, call them raw materials. You source the inputs, you take those inputs into your production or into your organization, you transform them into the outputs that you want to serve to clients and customers. Then ultimately, at the end of the day, you then dispose of whatever is left, maybe after the usage of those resources. So if you look at the flow, it's really a linear flow, right? So from take, make, waste, use up to waste. But what's happening in a circular economy is that we are reintroducing back, what you typically will call waste, right? So think about it, that waste really has a value. And one of the things I'm going to say is that waste really does have a value. And if you think about most waste, so whether it's organic waste, right? So think about food waste. If you compost food waste, actually can help you generate what we call methane. And if you think about what happened not too long ago with the closure of the economies and due to COVID, and most people had to produce what you call sanitizers, right? An essential input to that sanitizers was actually methane, right? And that's coming from food waste. Think about waste like liquid waste, right? Liquid waste, if properly distilled, can actually be used as fertilizers, and that can help with, agriculture. If you think about even things like, plastic waste, you can actually reuse plastic waste and and introduce them back into packaging different other products. So the big picture really with a circular economy is that waste does have a value, and that waste can be reintroduced back into the economic system. And more importantly is that the idea around always using virgin raw materials, really is something that should be discouraged. And the reason for this is that if you think about it, right, resources are finite, but our demand for resources are infinite. we might get to a situation where we might need certain resources and we find that we don't have them, right? And that's why it's throwing up a lot of big, broad, social and economic challenges, right? But the bigger picture is a circular economy is one where we essentially want to optimize the use of resources and extend the usage of those resources. And where we get to a situation where we do have waste, waste can also be regenerated back to also serve as an input again into the process. And that creates a continuous loop. And that's why we call it a circular economy.
Interesting. Very interesting. I listened to you carefully, and there were certain things that came on recurring. And so I am tempted to ask, Mr. Kalumba, is the circular economy not another name for an economy that recycles its waste?
That's a very interesting question, and it's one of the things we hear a lot, right? So I've been researching on this, for a couple of years, and it's a common question that I do get asked. So let me put it this way: that the recycling of the waste is just one aspect. In fact, it's even the final aspect if you look at the chain of activities in the economy. So there are quite a lot of activities that when we aggregate all of them forms the circular economy. So take for instance, the concept of leasing. So when you lease items, really extends, the concept of how you look at the usage and the ownership of even those items. When you lease an item, use it for a single use, you can return it back to the owner who can then save someone else again, right? So leasing is one part of it. Even the concept of refurbishing, resharing items as well. So I just want to say that recycling is just one aspect of the circular economy. In fact, a lot of the work in a circular economy is even around how we think through the way we even design our products and design our services. So from even the ideation stage, the thought through process, what sort of resources should you use? How do I limit even the use of virgin materials, right? So think about it that recycling of waste is just one part of the circular economy. It's much broader than just recycling waste. So from conception to how you think about the usage of products to how you even ensure that product in itself can be used for as long as possible, right? So the sum total of all these activities is essentially what creates the circular economy. So it's much broader than waste recycling, but waste recycling is a very significant input into the circular economy.
Awesome. Thank you for laying that at rest for us. And so we get under the bus. What will you say will be the key features of a circular economy?
So that's another very fundamental question, because we must appreciate, all the characteristics that define a circular economy. All right. So when you look at a circular economy, essentially there are quite a lot of elements, but I think 7 of this I'm going to reel out does really explain what it is. The first concept or the first feature of a circular economy is the concept of using resources that can be regenerated. Right. So in a circular economy, any resource that you would use should be a resource that can be regenerated. And the bigger picture is that we can extend the life, we can extend the usage of those resources, right? So the concept of a single use of a resource, doesn't help the economy at large. So a circular economy would require resources that can be regenerated, that can be reused. So that's one feature, right? Regenerative resources. Another feature of a circular economy is the concept of waste. Now, not being an end result of an activity in an economy, but rather waste can also be a resource, right? And not too long ago, we spoke about recycling of waste. So a feature of a circular economy is that we should think about the various waste that we generate, in our economy. And those waste, when you segregate them, each of those waste can actually be a resource that can be plowed back as well into our economic system. Another feature of the circular economy is the idea around, extending what is already in use. So if you think about concepts like, reusing items, right? If you think about concepts like sharing items, right? So the big picture again is we don't need to start making use of new or virgin materials, right? Whatever is already in circulation in the economy can be reused, can be extended, right? So that's another feature. So the extensive use of what's already available in the system. Another feature of a circular economy is the way you think about a business model. So one thing we say about the circular economy is that any business that wants to key in into a circular economy has to rethink the way they conduct and carry out the operations, right? So the shift in thinking, also the culture and the mindset of everyone, right, is something. So a key element of circular economy is just requires that, the business models, for every participant, right, and every business operating the circular economy has to be rethought, as a business model where essentially we can reuse items, we can, keep extending the usage of items. So rethinking the business model. And very soon, I hope I'm going to get a chance to speak on circular business models, which is really one of the attributes of businesses that will embrace the circular economy. Another feature of a circular economy is incorporating digital technology. And if you think about it, right, technology allows us to do a couple of things. So I'm on this call with you, Mr. Akin, and perhaps this session might be recorded, might be reshared, can be rewatched, even in 5 to 10 years to come, right? That still is consistent with the concept of reusing what is already, in existence, and also extending, for as long as possible, right? So anything you have that is leveraged on technology can be used, for as long as possible. If there are new technologies, it can also be upgraded in line with those new technologies. So incorporating technology, incorporating digital ways of achieving things is also an essential part, of a circular economy. Another very strong key feature of a circular economy is partnerships. Because if you think about it, Mr. Akin, a single organization or a single entity really can't really, solve this problem of keeping things in extension for as long as possible, or minimizing waste. It requires that we look through our value chain, our supply chain, right? So everyone basically has to collaborate, with an essential part of the ecosystem so that we jointly deliver, an economy that is really circular in nature. And for me, the final part of a circular economy is always thinking about the future, right? So I'll call that designing for the future. So a feature of a circular economy is that, all participants must increasingly think about what the future would look like. I come back to a point I did say not too long ago, that, resources are finite, but the use and the demand for resources are infinite. So if we want to make sure we don't have a resource crisis much later in the future, we must always think about what the future might look like, what the future might look like in terms of demand for resources and how we use resources. So essentially, those 7 things are the features of a circular economy.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much. And Mr. Kelumba, as you know, whether it's in linear economy, whether it's in an economy that is in recession, there are economies like that, or economies that are progressing, and now circular will be that key factor of who, people, who drives, who accelerates. And so I'm constrained to ask you, who are these key actors in the circular economy?
That's a very brilliant question, and sometimes, when I hear things like this, it makes it look like, we are trying to, come up with something that really it's outside of what has been in existence. So everyone who is an active participant in an economy is also an actor in the circular economy. It's really the mindset around how we, adopt processes that really does change. But just to be very clear, in giving you specific examples, so businesses and in companies in general are very key actors in circularity. So alternatively, if we don't say circular economy, you can refer to it as circularity. So businesses and corporations are a very big actor, or are very big actors in the circular economy. And that's because essentially the usage of resources is driven by businesses. Also, a key actor in the circular economy would also be cities, townships, because really that's a natural habitat. And when we speak to usage of resources, those resources, are actually situated, in all of these locations, right? In cities and townships, in locations, geographical locations. Another key actor would be the government, because the government has a huge part to play when it comes to regulations and legislating and even creating incentives, for how to support businesses in their migration, to secular business practices and ultimately the circular economy as well too. And then your supply chain, right? So every business ultimately delivers value within the concept of their supply chain, right? So your suppliers, even your customers are essentially, because customers have to embrace this concept of even, you're changing your business model to incorporate circularity. So when you deliver products, for example, that have elements of resharing or elements of recycling, they must also embrace it, right? And so if you think about it, right, everyone really is an active participant in the circular economy, including you and I.
You can say that again. Thank you very much for delineating that. Uh, as you spoke, and I'm sure in the minds of a lot of our professional colleagues, business, the SDG goals comes to my mind. About 17 SDG goals that we know that we have always had. And I'm constrained to think and interrogate with this question. That is the circular economy just another sustainability fad? And how does this circular economy relate to sustainable development goals?
Uh, Mr. King, that's a fantastic question, and it's also a question that is very apt, for the conversation that we're having today. Relationship with circularity and the sustainable development goals. So the first thing I would say is, so circularity or the circular economy isn't a fad, right? It is a reality, and it actually deserves an urgency of now in how we tackle it and ensure that business practices really adopt secular behaviors. So it is not, if I wanted to give you a very direct response, the focus is quite clear with circularity. And I did say that the focus in circularity is resource optimization, right? Ensuring that we can use resources for as long as possible, right? And the bigger picture is that resources are finite, right? So we're not blessed with having all the resources, and if we're not careful, we might have a problem for future generation. And also ensuring that we minimize waste, to its barest minimum, and that's really an urgency. And if you think about a lot of the social or societal problems we do face. So think about activities like climate change, right? As we use resources, especially virgin resources, right, a lot. So think about the impact it might have on deforestation, right? Think about the impact it might have on displacing organizations or habitats, from their natural locations. So we're having conversations about life underwater, right? So as we look at our processes for evacuating some of our waste, and you find out that some of the waste might find itself ending up even in the ocean. So these are very big social problems that circularity is really addressing. So circularity is not a fad. I think circularity is a reality, and it deserves the urgent attention. You then asked me a question in terms of the relationship with circularity and the sustainable development goals. So why circularity focuses a lot really on resources and optimizing the use of resources and minimizing waste, to its barest minimum. Sustainability is broader than that, right? So sustainability focuses on what I would naturally call the 3 Ps, right? Focuses on people, the society. It focuses on the planet, the natural environment, and obviously, a a strong part of sustainability as well too is on economic performance. It's on financial performance. And extend that to the concept of being profitable. And if you look at it, there are 17 sustainable development goals. But if you look at the relationship with circularity and the sustainable development goals, I can see some clear alignments. So SDG 12 speaks to responsible consumption and responsible production. And circularity really is strong on saying that we should optimize the use of resources. We should ensure that as much as possible that we use regenerative resources. And that speaks to how we go about our production. Production should be carried out in such a way that we minimize, waste that you have at the end of the process. And if possible, extend that waste by, reintroducing that back into the system. So that speaks to SDG 12. Another very big issue that circularity does solve as part of the sustainable development goals is SDG 13 that speaks to climate change, right? And if you think about the impact on the demands for resources, that might also, industrialization is something that we're seeing a lot, right? Urbanization is also a very big issue. And this has its impact in terms of the amount of greenhouse gas that's been emitted into the natural environment. And this is really creating a very big, climate problem. And that's why there's a lot of conversations on global warming, right? So just to say to you that there is the relationship, but the focus in circularity is just a small part when you look at the broader conversations around sustainability and the sustainable development goals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ikelumba. I usually ask my guests when we talk on issues of policies, the commanding heights, and the economy on this critical aspect of exemption. Are there categories of businesses that are exempted from the circular economy?
Fantastic question. and honestly, that also speaks to the value and the potentials, of the circular economy. So that was a very brilliant question, but I'll give a very direct response. Every business, it has to be involved, in the circular economy or in the shift to a circular economy, or some might say in a transition, to circular business practices. Every business. So there aren't any clear exemptions. But what has happened is that, so there have been sectors that are actually taking the lead in the adoption or in the migration to circular business practices. So if you think about, sectors that really are intensive in the use of resources, so most production-based organizations, most manufacturing-based organizations, those were the early set of adopters, of circular business practices. So, for example, think about very heavy manufacturers, right? Adidas of this world, the manufacturing, the oil and exploration companies in the world, the big manufacturers, the fast-moving consumer goods, producers, those are very big adopters of circular business practices, right? Fashion is also a very big one where we've seen, an increasing adoption of circular business practices, right? But every business, and you know what's interesting, Mr. Akin, professional services, and that also speaks to us as professional accountants, right? So many of the very big professional accounting firms you would find in the world over, not even excluding the big four, have actually set up a practice, within the business, just focused on helping businesses, embed circular business practices, and just even offering advisory services on how to transit, from their traditional business model to circular business models. So every business, and the way to appreciate what I mean when I say every business, can adopt circularity is, I listed out 7 key features of a circular economy, not too long when I started, incorporating digital technology, using regenerative resources, extending, what's already made, designing for the future. For as long as a business is addressing or is incorporating any of these 7 features that I listed earlier on, then that business is already embedding circular business practice. So if you find out that, your business, you're adopting the use of technology, that's you embedding circularity. If you find out that you are collaborating with your partners, various inputs into your supply chain in delivering value to your clients, that's already circularity in practice. If you find out that you have a way where you plow back, your waste, into your process, I'll give you a good example. So a lot of organizations, do things like recycling their paper, right? You don't have a single use of a paper. I know a lot of organizations that even their laptops, when they've depreciated their laptops, right, also find a way of ensuring that those laptops can also be sourced back to organizations that are big on electronic waste recycling as well too, right? So that's also one way to look at organizations adopting circular business practices. Also, in the way organizations also even design their waste disposal. So very, very common, you find that in a lot of organizations there might be separate designated centers for how you dispose waste, whether it's a liquid waste, whether it's an organic waste, whether it's a plastic waste, right? And the bigger picture is that when they delineate these things in that manner, they work with partners who can then dispose these things and, more importantly, recycle them into different parts of the ecosystem. So every business, and it does have a place for everyone, right? So every business should actually adopt and embed circular business process. So there's no business that is exempted.
Awesome. And so we must also now delineate and include Olawale Tolulope, who just asked if the circular economy sounds more like SDG Goal 12. I think you mentioned this before, which is to
Yeah,
ensure
fantastic. That's
sustainable
actually the
consumption and
direct.
production
Yeah,
systems. Excellent,
yeah.
excellent. And I'm happy you you touched you touched base with us professional accountants and some of the big fours, some of the local firms will be encouraged, hopefully, to get into circularity. But talking about us professional accountants specifically, in what areas can we, as professional accountants, upskill as it relates to circularity?
That's fantastic. And I think that speaks to the trust of our conversation today. And I'm so passionate, to speak on this really. So the first thing is to understand where the opportunities are, and then we can then upskill, to ensure that we can harness those opportunities. So I can clearly list 6 things that I see here as opportunities, and where we as professional accountants can upskill. So the first thing is in building secular business strategies, right? Or imbibing secular business strategies. So you will find out that a lot of the times, as accountants, you might be playing the role of an internal business advisor, or if you run an accounting practice, you might actually be providing external business advisory services to your clients. So understanding, business models and strategies that do embed circularity is a great one. And there are clear examples of some of those things, right? So think about sharing models, right? Models that allows you, businesses share rather than actually an outright sale of products. Even leasing is also a very big classical case of embedding circularity. So if you find that you can provide advisory services on how businesses can lease a lot more their products, right, rather than actually making an outright sale, right? That's also one way you can look at an opportunity for professional accountants upskill. Another very direct area where professional accountants can upskill is in the area of measuring circular impact. So think about several things I've said today, right? Whether it's around, the environmental impact, that is mitigated, as you recycle things, as you reuse things, as you refurbish things, right? So clearly the measurement of some of these things are a great area where professional accountants can upskill. So traditionally we are used to measuring financial data. If you can then extend your skill set to then measuring other secular data and information, that's a clear, very good example as well too. And a couple of organizations are actually doing a lot of work with how to measure secular data. I'm going to cite the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They're doing a lot of work. They actually have a solution that helps organizations measure their secular impact. So you can help your clients in measuring the secular impact of what they do. Another area is really analysis. So after measuring it, what does the analysis, around the measurement do say? That's a strong area where even us as professional accountants, we can upskill and learn how to analyze, secular data and what really it does mean, right? And the next extension of that is preparing secular reports, right? There's a private organization called the Coalition for Secular Accounting. That's an initiative with the chartered accountant in Netherlands, right, and a private sector firm called the Circle Economy. And so they've been giving guidelines on how organizations can actually churn and produce, secular reports. So that's also another area we can upskill. There are quite a lot of novel reporting frameworks, So, for example, integrated reporting, natural capital accounting, life cycle costing, full cost accounting. These are areas where we as professional accountants we can upskill because these are very essential to how we analyze and how we report on secular impacts as well. Then I'm not going to forget also financing as well too, because if you think about it, right, a transitioning from our traditional business model to a secular business model can actually create some funding gap for a while. So one of the things we can do is how to actually estimate what finance gap we need and also work out, situations where we can close out that financing gap. So upskilling in the area of how to finance a secularity gap as organizations think of transiting from their current traditional business model to secular business model. So I think these are areas where professional accountants can upskill. Then obviously, right, training is also another area, right? Training, clients and training, stakeholders on what secular business practices do mean. So these are opportunities you can upskill as a professional accountant and deliver value.
Wow. So many areas that we can get in and get trained. I am going to give us a bit of a breather. I'm going to ask that our participants who are just coming in, this is ICAN on Air. Looking at the subject of circular economy, opportunities for professional accountants. If you have questions, please lay them on. Type them on, we'll take them. We haven't guessed it, Mr. Jonathan Ike Olumba. We will go now for a short break. We'll be back with you very shortly to continue. Don't go away.
Hi there. Are you still thinking about why you should register for the 4th ICAN Malaysia International Accountants Conference? It's okay. The conference focus this year is specifically targeted at ensuring that all delegates become future ready and fully equipped to navigate the current times. There are also a lot of insights and discoveries that await you at this year's conference. You also get the chance to experience both the personal and professional impact of the conference. What about the networking, the tour experience, and lots of engaging interactions to bring you an all-round value? So there's no more time left for thinking. You have got to take action now. So register today and join other professionals at the 4th ICAN Malaysia International Accountants Conference from the 16th to the 19th of May 2022 at the Adia Hotel Kedah, Langkawi. For more information, please visit www.ican-malaysia.org. See you there.
Oh, thank you for staying on. And we've been looking at this very critical subject to the profession and to businesses generally. circular economy, the opportunities for professional accountants. Fielding questions to Mr. Jonathan Ikeolumba, ACA, and he has clearly delineated to us some of those very key principle areas that circular economy, or what we call circularity, looks at. Is generative, looks at waste and the concept of plowback, extending what is in use, looking at our business model and rethinking through them. Of course, naturally incorporating digital technology. We also talked about partnership and designing for the future. And for us, professional accountants, and students, and friends, or the bean counters who are online today, couple of areas that we can begin to look at, thinking creatively to building strategies around circularity, the area that we have shown to the world we are A1, measuring and analysis, reporting, circularity, giving the reports, of course, financing, another key area, and training for us. I will quickly get back to you now, Mr. Ike Olumba, but I'll take Chooks Norris. If ATSWA results are out, a person checks his or her results and doesn't see his registration number, what does that mean? I don't particularly understand the question, but I wonder if you did. Hello?
Okay, was that to me?
Yes. I mean, Norris just asked the question that if you look at the results and the results are not out there, I was thinking of the circularity aspect of that question. What what does that mean? Otherwise, we'll say
So
any
so
development.
so
Okay, go ahead.
okay. If you can hear me, I was just going to make a joke that the results being delivered, online, using digital tools is actually one way to look at circularity as well. So, I did say that a feature of a circular economy is adoption of digital technologies as well. So, I was just saying that for jokes.
I know, and designing for the future, that is really the future, the digital. So you press a button, you look at your results, and you find that you haven't done well, you accept, you regenerate, and then you go back. But are there developments in Nigeria as a whole in circular economy?
Oh yes, this is actually very apt. So one of the things that I can authoritatively say, I mean, I've been researching on this for a while. So the African Development Bank actually has worked with some of its partners, and they've actually instituted a fund. I think the fund is something like Africa Circular Economy investments. And so they've actually worked with some key stakeholders in Nigeria, and they've set up what I'll call like a working group. So we have the Nigeria Circular Economy Working Group, made up of very reputable stakeholders in the economy. And one of the things that I know is a common mandate for them is to actually build a policy that will guide, national activities, and just ensuring that every participant in the economy actually does adopt and embed circular business practice, right? So those sort of initiatives, in addition to private sector initiatives that happens, even across the universities, there are quite a lot of pockets of work that is happening on the circular economy front in terms of, just trying to see how we can have a policy that guides our activities from a national perspective. And that is
Fantastic.
something I know.
Fantastic. And thank you very much. I go back to reporting now and then drill down a
Yeah,
little bit more for us accountants.
yeah.
And I'd like to ask you, how is circularity measured and how is it reported in a business? And are there any corporate reporting rules governing the reporting of circularity?
Mr. King, that's actually a three-in-one question, and that's a very nice one. I got you very clearly, and I think it's also relevant for this session. So the first question you asked me was, how is it measured, right? So I'll bring it back again to the broad issue that so we do not have a uniformity in measuring or trying to define circularity based metrics, but they are very common metrics. So for example, consumption rates, reusability rates, the rate of recycling, the rate of distilling, some part of the resources we use. So for example, how you clean out water, the rate at which you clean out water, the rate of use of virgin materials in a business. So there are quite a lot of secular business metrics, like I just listed out, that we can measure. But I think what is important, which also speaks to a next question, is how are these reported? So I can say to you that we do not have a uniform metric to reporting on circularity. And quite a lot of private actors have actually come up with reports, best practice reporting on how to measure and report on circular impact. I highlighted the work of the Coalition of Circular Accounting, which is in the Netherlands. They have a beautiful document. And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation as well too has an analytical software called the Circulytics that helps with capturing. In fact, as a last count, because my firm is also a signatory to the Circulytics software. As a last count, we have about 1,300 organizations that have signed up. So this like a free service, and they just help you with some of this input data I just asked for, and then provide a holistic report for the organization on how much circular impact they've attained, and also just report that so that stakeholders can clearly see the value in it. So just to say that you don't have a uniform metrics around this, but we also have in terms of financial reporting, we also have pseudo reportings that don't really speak to circularity in that at that detailed level, but some of the work that we feed into circularity. So for example, we have integrated reporting, right? And not too long ago, we also had the sustainability standards board that were trying to issue sustainable standards as well too. So there's a lot of development and work on some of these non-financial reporting, even though as at now we don't have a uniformity in some of these things across every jurisdiction. But to that extent that organizations are trying to look for a standard for reporting on some of the environmental impact, some of the circular impact, some of the social impact, you have standalone frameworks that do exist. And then finally, you asked about a question on corporate governance. So back to what I've said is these things are still private sector led. So the big picture is, as more organizations, and that's really a wake-up call for we as professional accountants, as more organizations then migrate or transit into the circular economy, we can start to deepen the conversations on having a unified approach, right, to reporting on circular practices and circular metrics as well too. But I know that some private sector participants have started leading the course on how to prepare these reports.
Thank you very much for that. And moving towards time, usually not our friends on this program, I must ask you this very briefly. How much value can be created from a business that embeds circularity? And please help us wrap it up and give us your parting shots on this subject for today.
Oh, fantastic question in terms of value. So let me cite a very common report and figure that has been put out there in the public domain. So Accenture had done a report. I'm sure Accenture had done a report and estimated that the size of the opportunities presented by a transition to circular economy is as much as $4.5 trillion. right? So that's directly value that businesses that subscribe or transit to a circular economy can benefit from. You also have some international groups. There's the International Reporting Group that has said that, by from 2030, that they've estimated that every year the circular economy can add $1 trillion into revenue. But the big point is, if you think about some of the concepts I've shared on circularity, things around, how you recycle your waste, and there's an opportunity cost with that. If your waste can then be turned back and added back into the loop in your organization to create value, there's also a direct value, you can look at it, and there's also a value from the perspective of the alternative opportunity cost of disposing some of those waste as well too. And if you think about it too, even in terms of brand reputation, so it's circularity feeds into sustainability, and there are quite a lot of stakeholders who are keen on businesses. I mean, the UN has a target of 2030 for all businesses to actually adopt and start imbibing sustainable development practices. So from that perspective, you can speak to reputation, stakeholder management as well too, and stakeholder buy-in, right? So these are all direct values that can be created. Also, it can be a revenue line as well too for us on the call as professional accountants as well too, and we can seek out to extract value. So if we think about the broad concepts that I've shared on circularity, it does provide value, both now in the present term and even in the long term.
Your parting shots on this subject.
Oh yeah, fantastic. So for me is I get asked a lot, is circularity just about recycling waste? And I think it came up in a question. So for me is I look at circularity as designing out waste. So a lot of the conversation, and that's really something for anyone interested in this concept for me, is how does our mindset and thought process as participants in the economy then change from how we think about the use of resources, and ensuring that even from the get-go in how we design our products and our service offering, we think about how we ensure that waste in any form is eliminated. So even if it means the way we source materials as well, we think about it, the type of materials we source, if we can look for alternative of to the materials we use, and even the concept of a single use of a resource. I did say something, and I'm going to end with that resources are finite, but the usage of resources and the demands on resources are infinite. So there's a gap that we must close, and we should just think about how we can keep extending the use of resource, and that's really what circularity is about, right? The optimization of the use of resource.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ike Olumba. We're going to be calling on you more often and more often. We have benefited from your response to the questions that have been posed. We can't thank you more, more enough. Somebody is posing a question. Unfortunately, we are going to harvest this. Uh, it's one of the chats from the public. Unfortunately, time is not our friend. Please harvest them. We can't always even get back to you on that. And so, a few very important announcements has been scrolling on your screen and has something to do with the ICAN May 2022 professional ICAN May professional exams. Now holds between May 10 and 12, 2022. It was earlier scheduled for Tuesday, May 17. So through Thursday, May 19, 2022. Like I said, it's going to be May 10 through May 12, 2022. And this is due to unforeseen circumstances. Also, the 69th induction ceremony of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria will now hold May 24th and 25th, 2022. It was earlier scheduled from May 24 to May 25, year 2022. Making this announcement is Ahmed M. Kumshe, Professor, FCA, who is the Registrar, Chief Executive of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Next ICAN on Air segment will be May the 3rd, 2022. May the 3rd, year 2022. And there we are saying that the time and venue will be 6 p.m. West African time on all ICAN online channels, the YouTube and the Facebook. The topic will be internet control over financial reporting, ICFR, and the regulator. What are the expectations for the professional accountant? We're having guesting with us Dr. Emotimi Agama, PhD, GWMSI, ACFE, LIFA, ACMA, GMA, ACS. He is a chartered management accountant, an economist, investment analyst, risk manager, a chartered stockbroker, and is currently managing director at the Nigerian Capital Markets Institute, a subsidiary of the Security and Exchange Commission. Dr. Agama serves as regional executive member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accounts, CIMA, UK, and is chairman, board of trustees for Purity Rose Orphanage Home. I drop my nugget for today with you, and I start, quote, if it can be reduced, it can be reused, can be repaired, rebuilt, refurbished, resold, recycled, or composted, then it should really be restricted, redesigned, or removed from production. Quoting Peter Seeger. And so the sun sets on ICAN on Air today to resume again with you on May 3rd, 2022. I always say, be the change you would like to see. Until then, I remain Akin Fatunke, your anchor, ICAN on Air program. Bye for now.
The organization has. So we're talking about how the board behaves, or in some cases, how they misbehave, because that also happens, rather than the tax they make.
Very rare Yoruba names that I know.
I tell you, you have secured the name